understand the first step, I don't move them on. It's not doing them justice. We don't have to get this by next Tuesday. We got to get it right. Are we on?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're back on. Sorry if we lost you guys. All right. But no, we don't move people along. That's like, we've been talking about that periodically since we started. And so many people, you see it all the time. They come in, they get a sponsor, and the next thing they're doing, they're on the fourth step. And this is happening every day, people. It doesn't happen as much here in Oklahoma as it does around the other places, but it still happens here quite often. And that's the sponsor's fault. It's not the newcomer's fault. How do you got somebody with 2 weeks on step 4? They have no idea about the disease concept. They don't have any relationship with a higher power. They don't have none of this stuff down. So this is a process. And if you do this process the way the book is outlined, you'll get so much more out of it. All right, we're back on page 37. So he says, second paragraph, you may think this an extreme case. To us, is not far-fetched. For this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us. We have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences. But there was always the curious mental phenomenon that parallel with our sound reasoning, there inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check. The insane idea won out. Next day, we would ask ourselves in all earnestness and sincerity, how could it have happened? So what he's saying is that your sound reasoning and your insane thinking are running parallel. But the insane idea always wins out. Well, it's that, and I think we said it last week or the week before, is that sick thinking can't fix sick thinking. All right? So sick thinking doesn't fix sick thinking. So we have to get beyond this stuff here because the disease is powerful and I'm powerless. And it'll always make me do what I don't want to do unless I'm combating it through this process. Okay, which Jim was not. Okay, Jim had 14 red flags that he didn't know. But here's the thing, right? We're so much more blessed than Jim was because we've got all of these years of AA and recovery to look back on and to learn from. Jim didn't have that. It was they were in their infancy. They didn't have anything to look back on and no knowledge of that. We have the knowledge from their bitter experiences. And that's why they wrote this book, so that they could pass it on to us so we don't have to suffer the way they suffered. You follow that? All right. Now, I want you to mark this page, this paragraph that we just read. Always the curious mental phenomenon that parallel with our sound reasoning, there inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink. Our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check. I want you to mark that because when we go back to what you were just talking about on page 30, we're going to reference this to help us. Again, we're studying not a novel. We're studying a textbook. And the way to study a textbook is you refer one page to another, and that's what you do. Okay. So down the bottom of page 37, he says, our behavior is as absurd and incomprehensible with respect to the first drink as that of an individual with a passion, say, for jaywalking. He gets a thrill out of skipping in front of fast-moving vehicles. He enjoys himself for a few years, in spite of friendly warnings. Up to this point, you would label him as a foolish chap having queer ideas of fun. I got to tell you, the first time I read this, I thought, how stupid. Come on. I said, this is a horrible example because this guy's, there's no other way to say it, this guy's an effing asshole. I mean, he's that stupid, you know? And so we read what he does, and Jay Walker, how he breaks his back and he breaks his legs and he goes through this and he finally loses his job and his wife and he's held up to ridicule. He shuts himself up in a sign, hoping the day he comes out, he runs in front of a bus, right? All of this is just insane. It's just stupid, right? But then you read on page 38, you read the second paragraph that says, you may think our illustration is too ridiculous, but is it? We who have been through the ringer have to admit if we substituted alcoholism for jaywalking, the illustration would fit us exactly. And I stopped when I read that and I went, holy shit, yeah. It's so, where alcohol has been involved, we have been strangely insane. It's strong language, but isn't it true? It's very true. All right. And then the next, on page 39, you got Fred. And Fred went, now here's another example of the insanity of alcoholism, because Fred went, we're not going to read it, we're just going to talk about it for a minute. On the first paragraph, there's some italics here. He said, with hardly an exception, but the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. This is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize to smash home upon our alcoholic readers as has been revealed out of our bitter experience. Now, there's nowhere else in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that there's this harsh a language right here. This is the harshest language Bill uses to describe what's going on with us, okay? And he puts it in italic. But the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. This is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize to smash home upon our alcoholic readers as it has been revealed to us out of bitter experience. So he's saying here, pay attention to this. I don't care what you know, that's not going to get you sober. This is not one of my brothers, he's dead now, but he was he took that course. He was able to speed read, and he was really good in school. He'd go through a book and he'd get 100 on every test. He was real good. He was very book smart. But if he walked down the street, a guy could sell him a $5 watch for $500. He had that issue going on. So it didn't matter what he knew. All the self-knowledge in the world wouldn't help him from getting conned. All right. And all the self-knowledge in the world not going to help you not take a drink. It's just not. So this is not a program. It's not a program of knowing it. It's not a, there's a whole chapter into action. Not into, it doesn't say into thinking, into what we know, it's into action. So Fred had a good business deal and everything was going good. If you go on page 40, he's so on page 41, he says, on the top of the page, said, I'd been out of town before on this particular dry spell. There was nothing new about it. Physically, I felt fine. Neither did I have any pressing problems or worries. My business came off well. I was pleased, and I knew my partners would be too. It was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. Very poetic writing, right? End of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. Anyway, what Bill is doing, he's giving you example after example. The jaywalker, right? Replace that with alcoholism. Jim, that, wasn't aware of all the red signs. Fred, who's got a great business deal every day, not a cloud on the horizon. And he says, I went to my hotel and leisurely dressed for dinner. Italic. As I crossed the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. That was all, nothing more. Okay? What did I tell you before? I told you that once you learn the truth about yourself, you'll never be able to drink or use on that truth again, right? The only way you could drink or use after that is to buy some insane lie. And here's Fred buying the insane lie. Because he can't drink on the truth, so it'd be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. That's a lie. It wouldn't be nice. It'd be destructive. It'd be murder. It'd be terrible. It's like we talked about last week when we talked about I wanted to drink. Nobody wants to do what happens to us when we do this, right? So he got all messed up, and then he was gone, and he wound up getting a plane to New York. I don't think he was going to New York. But, and then, so let's skip over because I want to get to this here. So there's just more examples of this, right? Okay, go to the bottom of page 43. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. He doesn't say no defense, no mental defense. So he says the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power. So his thinking is not going to fix him at all, right? So there's two rules that you want to remember. Rule number one, don't sweat the small stuff. Rule number two, there's no big deals. But what this is telling you here, that you cannot intellectualize that which is spiritual. There's no chemical solution to a spiritual problem. Okay? So now we've got 15 minutes left, and what I want you to do, I want to go over what we're going to do. You're going to have homework this week, people. And for those of you that are online watching, you have to have your homework done next week. Okay? Let's go back to page 30. Okay. So the second paragraph on page 30 says, we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost self that we were alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery. So this is the step before the step. Okay? Again, if you don't do this and you just go right to page 59 and you go to the first of the 12 steps, the only thing you could possibly do is agree with the statement on page 59. Admitted we were powerless, that our lives would become unmanageable. That's all you can do. Page 30, second paragraph. We learned, so if we look at that, we know that we come here, we didn't know. We had to learn it. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost self that we were alcoholic. Now, let's look at that for a minute. What does it mean to fully concede? Surrender. Surrender, okay. Get rid of the delusion.
After resisting, we accept as true.
After resisting, we accept as true. So can we agree that just to save time and argument, can we agree that we're talking about getting gut level honest? I mean, real gut level honest. Does that make sense? Is that okay? Okay. So now, if that's what it's asking us to do, let's look at how can we do that? How do we get gut level honest? So the first thing I'd say is, can I use my mind to get gut level honest? Can I think my way through this? No, why not? The disease centers in my mind, doesn't it? What did it say before? It said that we learned, therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than, I can't think my way. Sick thinking doesn't fix sick thinking. So I can't use my mind. Can I use my mouth? Can I talk through it? No. Why not? Whatever comes out of my mouth comes from my mind, doesn't it? Okay. Can I use my heart? How many people say, yeah, raise your hand? My heart. Okay. Technically speaking, your heart is an organ that pumps blood through your body. That's what it does. Somewhere a long, long time ago, somebody had to make some money. They came up with a great marketing scheme. They came up with this little baby with a halo and a bow and arrow, and they invented this thing that your heart is about love And and they sold a lot of shit doing that, right? But I can just as well say to you, I love you with both of my kidneys. Because your heart is just an organ that pumps blood through you. You can't get gut level honest with your heart. Your heart is about your feelings. Right? So if I can't use my mind and I can't use my mouth and I can't use my heart, you want to know what I could use to get gut level honest? My hand. I could take a pen, put it in my hand, and commit to a piece of paper. Everything that I do when it comes to alcohol and drugs that I would not do if I were in sound mind. And whatever you're working the steps on, the same process applies. So if you're working the steps on gambling, it's everything that you think and do that you would not think and do if you were in sound mind. No matter how silly it may seem, you write it down. You make a list of everything you think and do that you would not think and do if you were in sound mind. Doesn't matter what you're working the steps on. It's the same process. If you're working the steps on shopping, if you're working the steps on relationships or sex or whatever you're working the steps on, it doesn't matter. It's just, you write down everything you think and do that you would not think and do if you were in sound mind. For instance, so when I did mine on three things. I did mine on alcohol, cocaine, and marijuana. And on marijuana, all I wrote down on the piece of paper was, because it was true for me. I wrote down, eat a meal. And because, see, I can eat a 5-course meal and smoke a joint, and I'm going to eat another meal. And in sound mind, I never ate back-to-back meals like that. But I would do that. I'm positive. I can 100% concede to my innermost self. I can fully admit to my gut that I'm going to eat something after I smoke a joint. But in sound mind, I don't eat like that. When I did my cocaine